Welcome, I'm Tim and this is SV Paquita. Although it's being shot while I'm at work here, we are currently in the Gulf of Mexico, and the last two trips we've done here we've taken a beating, but now we're a little free. It's amazing. The Gulf of Mexico can be so violent one moment and so beautiful the next. So it's real nice. But today I want to talk to you about life rafts. And I know that many of you have life rafts, and I wanted to talk to you especially from work here, because I thought that I'm trying to find a place where the wind isn't blowing so hard, hopefully. Where here at work we're required to not only have life rafts and change them out every year, but we're also required to train on them. We have to be certified to use them. We go to school for that, and then every 5 years we have to refresh that. And I'm often reminded of some sort of bias. I guess we call that an information bias, where when I used to sell auto parts years ago, when the advent of anti-brake systems came along into the automotive market in mass, one of our brake reps told me that actual crashes increased because people said, oh, I'm invincible because I have the anti-lock brakes, when in fact, according to him, you may not be able to stop from hitting the wall, but you can choose where on the wall you're going to hit. You can't change the laws of physics. Anyway, this is about life rafts. What I'm saying is a lot of people will buy a life raft, they'll put it on their boat, and they never do anything with it after that, and they don't know that much about it, and hopefully 99.999% of us never have to use them. But the reason why we have a life raft is so that in that small possibility of us having to use it, we know how to use it properly. And I want to go over some things that are common mistakes, and some things that I got to tell you, in my last recertification, they weren't even taught, meaning they were taught in other ones. And so I want to give you some inside tips. Before we do that, I'm going to take you back to show you our life raft on here and just show you some things. It's going to be really noisy because we're underway and there's some blowers and all that, but I'll do a voiceover if it doesn't work. Okay, so here's our 10-man life raft, and there's a couple things that you should notice about it. One is that we have a hydrostatic release. Many yachts and sailboats don't have this. You know, it's too noisy back here. Let me go up. Okay, so yeah, that was a little too noisy. So what I'm going to show you was my life raft that we have on here is a 10-man life raft, and we usually only have 5 people on the tug. Obviously there's 2 people on the barge, but they have actually 2 life rafts on the barge, so that if the barge goes one side or the other side, they can let it go. The reason why we have a bigger life raft than we have people on the boat is because if you have to get in it, I mean, you want more than less. But that's something else to get into. But what I also want to tell you was that the hydrostatic release that we have is because, unlike sailboats, or hopefully sailboats don't sink as quickly as tugboats do. Tugboats are steel, they're very low to the water, and we often say that we try to keep all the water out of a tugboat, because if and when tugboats sink, they do that by tripping. You can see on my other channel I talk about tripping and other ones. But anyway, what happens is a lot of those times a tugboat, even as big as ours, will sink in literally seconds. And so because of that, we have a hydrostatic release that after 3 meters will actually sever the line space is limited, you'll usually put it in a place that you won't be able to get to quickly. The idea that you're going to have, 10, 20, 40 minutes to deploy a life raft, you might not have that luxury. So having it out on deck is kind of a important thing. Having it where it is on Paquita, there's a lot of lines there that it can get fouled in, that sort of thing. But I don't think that that's the biggest thing. The biggest thing is to be able to have the life raft out and available. So that's more important to me. I don't have a hydrostatic release on ours, and I don't really think that I'm going to need that, or hope that I don't see that as quite the priority that we do on the tugboat. So if you don't have a hydrostatic release, I don't think that's the biggest thing that you need to worry about. But anyway, on our boats we teach that we can deploy the life raft, it'll be made off. There's actually something called a weak link, so that even if you're tied to even if you're on the boat, on the life raft, and the boat is there, and the boat starts to sink, it will break the weak link before it will pull all of you over after it's blown up. But all these things. The things that you might not know about are things like getting in a life raft. So let's talk about some of the things that they teach us in school. And one of them is that broadly speaking, about 90% of all life rafts that inflate, and you usually don't have you usually don't need to have a life raft when it's a flat, calm day. Things are usually pretty bad. 90% of the time, they will inflate upright. There's about a 10% chance that it will actually inflate and be upside down. And that's something that a lot of people are concerned about after you start thinking about that. What am I going to do? And the answer to that is something that we train for. When we train in a pool, and we get in a life raft, and they have it flipped over. Each and every one of us has to practice flipping a life raft over. And it's really simple. All the life rafts will have a rope going from one side to the other side, and on the bottom. So if the life raft is having the bottom pointing up, somebody would get onto the life raft and climb up on there. You will find a big, it's not going to be hard to figure out where it is, but there's a big CO2 canister. And what you want to do is you put your feet right on the CO2 canister, it's horizontal at this point, and you grab the rope, which is going to the other side, you stand up and you just lean back, and you act as a pivot. And even a 50-man life raft, 150-pound guy can flip that thing right around. Obviously, this might be different if it's blowing 30 knots, but remember, we can't make things 100%. We have to mitigate the problem. So it's really important that you step on the side where the CO2 canister is, and not only because it adds weight to help you flip around, but if you did it the other way around, you run the risk of getting hit in the head with basically a scuba tank. Then that would be bad. So now the life raft is up, one person gets inside, and we're assuming that we have to swim over to the life raft. It would be nice if you could step on there. That would be ideal, but that's highly unlikely that that's going to happen. Oh, I should back up and say there is a running debate as to whether on a tugboat you launch a life raft upwind or downwind. And I handle that differently on my boat, on the boat that I work on here. I put that up to, generally speaking, the master is in the wheelhouse doing his thing, and the mate is launching the life raft. And I put it up to the mate's discretion to which side to do it. And let me tell you the reason why. When you launch a life raft, if you're on fire and you launch the life raft downwind, you run the risk of either catching the life raft on fire, or at least you guys getting overcome by fumes. And the fumes are usually what kill people in boat fires faster than the fire does. So obviously that time you'd want to be upwind, and you want to be able to somehow get away from everything. Then the other thing is that if it's not a fire situation, if you put it downwind, you could have the life raft blow away from you, which if you're sinking really fast, that might be a good thing to do. If the boat is settling, then maybe you want to stay as close to the boat as you can, because remember, it's the biggest target around. So as far as to launch upwind or downwind, I think it's important that we think about those things, but make that judgment call when that happens, depending on the emergency and the conditions that are at hand. But once you get into the life raft, there's a procedure that you need to do. The first person will get in, there's a little rope ladder, and believe me, it's much more difficult getting into a life raft than you would think. I mean, like a lot more. Now granted, when we do it, we're all doing it in immersion suits, the big Gumby suits, and it's very difficult to get in. I've never got in one without an immersion suit, but I can imagine, because of struggling so much to get in these things. You know, the life raft is like this, and the smaller the life raft, the harder it's going to be to get in. The bigger it is, the more stable it is. We get in a small one, it's going to be going all over the place. You finally find it, and you know, the ladder doesn't hang right down. It's supposed to, and I suppose if it was in a flat, calm water, it would. But when it's thrashing around, it's all, the rope ladder is all around. So you have to find that with your feet, and then slowly go. And what happens is, instead of going up like this, you put your feet in it, and then your feet go underneath the raft, and you end up almost going like this on the raft. So you have to come up over the top, and it's very difficult. Once again, I'm not telling you you can't do this or anything like that. I'm just saying that these are things that if you haven't thought of and you have a life raft, these are some of the things that you should think of. That getting in the life raft is much more difficult than one thinks. The next thing is, the next person to come in, the person who got in is at the door of the life raft and will help the second person in. The third person in comes in with a guy on either side pulling them into the life raft, and they go to the other side of the life raft. And this is to stabilize it, because now you're getting two people all on one side where the door is, and you run the risk of tipping over, not only in seas, but the wind blowing it as well. So that's something else. Now, something that I think too few people talk about this, and that's that life rafts are inflated by carbon dioxide. And life rafts are packed by humans, and they're recertified and rechecked by humans, and humans make mistakes. So ideally, all life rafts should inflate with all their windows and doors open. And when I say windows, they're really ports, you know, and that's really, really, really important. So in the event that your life raft inflates and all those are not open, be aware that you're probably, once you do that difficult maneuver of getting into the life raft, you're probably getting into an oxygen depleted environment, and then you would get in, take a couple gasps, and then fall asleep, and then the next person would get in, and they would do the same thing, and that would be a terrible disaster. So that's why we have all the windows open, to ventilate that. While we're talking about that, we should also talk about the idea that I believe it's 125, but it may be 150, but it's either 125 or 150. I'm gonna get in trouble with my safety guy for not knowing the exact number. But Coast Guard regulations state that a life raft canister, the CO2 canister that inflates it, has to be able to inflate, has to have enough volume for 125, I believe, but it might be 150% of the internal volume of the, I mean, not the internal volume, but of the tubes that it's inflating. And they do that for a reason, because gas, you know, condenses and expands with temperature. Your life raft has to expand. It has to be able to fully inflate, whether you're in the Arctic or in the tropics. And obviously, if you're in the tropics, there's going to be a lot more gas. It's going to feel, it's the same amount of gas, but it's going to be spread out a lot more in the tropics than it would be where it'd be more condensed or compressed in colder regions. So that's something that you have to understand. Having said that, when you get in, it's not uncommon that when you get in, all of a sudden everything's cool and you're thinking, okay, this is going to be all right, and you hear the and one of the valves looks like it blew open. Those are actually relief valves. And once again, I don't think people talk about that. You're going to have enough panic if you have to get in a life raft. You're already having a really bad day. You don't need to add to the stress by freaking out and thinking, oh my God, now the life raft is collapsing on itself. No, what's happening is it is blowing up to 100% and more, and when it blows over that, instead of popping, it relieves the gas with a pressure relief valve. So you will hear that. God forbid you were you probably going to get a lot of comments about this, about people disagreeing with me, and I'm cool with that. Please tell me what your thoughts are. But the idea of a ditch bag, once again, is a false sense of security for me. I have a rule on the tugboats here that the only thing we get is the EPIRB. The EPIRB is the only thing that matters. By the time we're in the Life Raft, and these EPIRBs today are not the EPIRBs of yesteryear, where you might have to wait 12 to 18 hours for a satellite pass to pick you up, and then they send out everything, and it takes days for all that. The new 406 EPIRBs that have the GPS built in them, and many of them also have, well, they have other locating features in them. But your EPIRB should be received almost immediately after you pull that. So the EPIRB is the only thing that you take with you. Now, granted, you've mustered, you've launched the Life Raft, you're getting ready to get in there, the boat hasn't gone down yet, you think you have some time, you want to get some other stuff. When I say other stuff, I'm not talking about your laptops or your passports or your logbook. All you salty guys out there, make sure you bring your logbook. You know what? I will take a recommendation from the Coast Guard for not having my logbook, because in that, the ability to take that means that I lived. All I care about is living. By the time you get on a Life Raft, that is the last thing. That's not part of the plan. It's the very end of the plan. Do not abandon ship unless everything else, you've exhausted every other possibility, and that's when you do it. So the only thing that you bring is the EPIRB. Granted, people will have a ditch bag. Some people will say, I keep my EPIRB in my ditch bag. Well, that's good. I just hope that you haven't stowed your EPIRB, and when you need your Life Raft, it's probably going to be really rough, and your ditch bag may have been tossed around a bit. Maybe you put it somewhere, hid it underneath the chart table or something like that. You know, all those things. When I bought Paquita, the previous owner had a ditch bag, and I think he got it when he got the EPIRB, because the EPIRB's, there's a spot for it and all that. I got rid of that and mounted my EPIRB, and it's not a self-deploying EPIRB, so I have it right in the companionway, so you don't have to go down below. You can just reach there and grab the EPIRB and go. So it's out of the weather, and it's very accessible, and nobody's going to hit it. So that I believe I have I'm not saying perfect for everyone, but perfect for me, the perfect place for my EPIRB. The idea of carrying, people come up with these great ideas. We need food, and we need water, and we need cell phones, and all this sort of stuff. And, all that, those are great, but you really have to think of them as luxury items. You know what you need? You need to get in a safe place and let people know that you're in trouble. And you've accomplished that if you successfully get in the Life Raft and activate the EPIRB. So that's a big thing. And look, I'm sure that there's nobody watching this that would be this misinformed. But just in case there is, if one person hears this and it changes, we might have saved a life. If you buy a boat and it comes with an EPIRB, or if you go to the store and buy an EPIRB, you haven't really done much yet. And what I mean by that is that the EPIRBs have to be registered, and you have to maintain them. I just recently found out my EPIRB through NOAA, my EPIRB recertification came back, and I was able to do it all online in about 3 minutes. It was the most efficient governmental website I've ever used, and they printed me out a new certificate and everything, and it was right there online, right? It was amazing. So if you have an EPIRB, make sure you register it to you. It has to be to you and your boat. And the reason being is that if you just go and buy an EPIRB and go off and you're headed for the Azores and you pop that EPIRB, they're gonna get an EPIRB distress. They will get that, but there'll be no other data with that. And having no other data, they're going to be reluctant to start the process working. In the information that you give them, you say the kind of boat you are, where you're, where it's registered, how many people were on board, typically, so they have an idea. Are they going to rescue a boat that has 500 people or a boat that has 2 people on it? This sort of thing. And then then it will also give you a couple different contact numbers and email addresses. When they get this, when the EPIRB goes off, they start checking all this stuff. They need to check, because unfortunately, they'll say, oh, we got to bring I have gallons of water ready to go. And you know what? There are stories of people that have been out to sea for over a month in a life raft, and they're amazing stories. If you look at all those long times at sea that people have been in a life raft, the one thing they have in common is they're all from a long time ago. Technology has changed. If you have an EPIRB and you're able to launch that EPIRB, you're not going to be in a life raft for a long time. And if you're in colder climates, it's pretty grim to say, but you don't have a lot of time anyway. If you're in warmer climates, you might have a lot more time. But water comes in the life raft. It's not going to come where you're going to have a month's worth of water, but they give you water and these sugar tablets, little protein bars or whatever. And different life rafts come with different things, but they have things like there's a knife in there and a fishing kit and signal mirrors and flares, all that sort of stuff. The life rafts will come with that sort of stuff. So the idea of having a ditch bag is a great idea if you had it with you all the time. But remember that you're not going to launch it on a day like this. You're going to launch this life raft when everything has gone wrong. It's blowing stink and the seas are washed, everything's soaking wet. You go down below, everything's probably floating down below anyway because you're abandoning ship. So I'm not really sold on for a yachty, and in this day and age with the technology we have, I think their primary focus should be launching the life raft and getting in only when you know that you're definitely going to. Oh, by the way, you should have a weak link to the frame that holds your life raft. You would launch the life raft, tie it off. You put it in the water. You pull out 90 feet of painter. You give it a big yank. The thing will pop open. 90% of the time, it's going to go up upright. Don't jump in. Get that thing wrapped, tied off. Where you on like a side cleat, wherever you decide you're going to get into it eventually. Get everyone together, talk about everything. If you have time, if the boat's not sinking, don't get in. Now, if down below is totally swamped and things are really bad, and you have to get in, you can get in the life raft, and you still don't have to go and let everything go. If you're tied to the boat, you have a knife in the life raft. You can cut your line. Some of you give you a drogue chute to slow you down. When it's windy, it will keep you fetched up in the seas a little bit better. But anyway, yeah, that I think that's kind of important to think about. That there are, a mistake that I made coming from the commercial side, going to the recreational side. When I bought the boat, I spent a lot of money and bought really good offshore life jackets. And you're saying, how is that a mistake? I'm not talking about inflatable ones. I'm talking about what some people might call the May West, the great big ones that you have that are rated for staying in the ocean. You all huddle up together and all that sort of stuff. One is they're expensive. Two is they take a ton of space. And three is they're so bulky they end up underneath our bed. And that's not a good place for life. Your life vest shouldn't be under the bed. And that's a real problem. Since then, we've got the Spinlock Volvo Racing Series ones with lanyards that we click in all around, to jack lines and that sort of stuff. But yeah, be careful. If you're doing a big offshore passage, you might want to consider, at the very least, borrowing, if not buying, some immersion suits. Like, for example, when mitigate your problems are going to cost money. But I think you've got, yeah, good quality Gumby suits for about $150 a piece. You might not use them all the time, but who knows? Maybe you're in a yacht club, or maybe you have other buddies that sail, and you say, hey, look, I'll buy 2, you buy 2. If I go on a place, I'll take 4 of them. If you go on a place, I'll give my 2 to you, and now you have 4. But immersion suits are good to have. But anyway, this was about life rafts. So remember, life rafts, don't get in until you have to get in, and when you get in, only bring in your only bring the EPIRB, and remember the thing is inflated with CO2, and the CO2 will kill you if it's not vented. Have everything open, and if you get in there and it's cold and you zip everything up, that's fine, but you might want to leave one window open just in case there's a leak. But it might not be one of those relief valves that's blowing off, but it might be something that is leaking over time, and CO2 will build up, and unfortunately, the way CO2 works, it usually puts you to sleep. And so you're probably going to be sleeping anyway, or sleepy, and then you drift off, and then you don't wake up. So that'd be a really bad thing. So remember the whole CO2 thing. Remember that if you have to flip it over, stand on the bottle, the CO2 bottle, and flip it towards you with a rope. And remember that getting in the life raft is not nearly as easy as you think it is. I'm saying it can't be done. Of course it can be done. That's why they have it. And there's some people that say, oh, my life raft comes with these water buckets, these bags that fill up with water, and yeah, that sounds great, and those are wonderful, but they probably won't be totally full and really working until you're already in the life raft. So just keep that in mind. And then I saw on one of the sailing channels they deployed their life raft to get ready to buy a new one. They wanted to check it out, and the actual bags had ripped off of theirs. Speaking of which, I should talk about that. My life raft actually fell out of certification last spring, and I was going to have it recertified, but I'm trying to prepare to get ready to go to the Med to do the Atlantic Loop. And the longer I wait, the closer I get to the day of my departure, the longer that 3-year window of certification will last. I had heard that if I don't recertify my life raft right away, that they won't certify it later. In other words, if it's been out of certification for 2 years, they might not read it. I went to this place and asked them that, and they said, no. I said, look, if it's still in certification, we open it up, it's bad, we're going to fail it, and we won't fix it. If it's 10 years out of date, and we open it up and it works, we'll certify it. I don't know about 10 years, but whatever their parameters are. Anyway, so in that case for me, I don't really see a life raft as being a big deal for me while I'm coastal cruising, mainly because I see my dinghy, which I'm dragging most of the time, or it's on Davidson, which can drop really quickly. My dinghy is my primary life raft, and so that's, I do that while I'm coastal cruising. But when I decide to go offshore, when we come back, and when we head for Gibraltar, and then head for, we head for the Azores, and then Gibraltar and all that, you can best assure that my life raft will definitely be recertified. And if you have an EPIRB, you should have really easy to follow instructions. I don't even think you have to read them. They're like picture instructions of how to test the thing without setting it off. That's something that not just the captain should know how to do. Everyone on the boat should know how to do that. And nobody should set that thing off until the captain tells them to, because after it's set off, there's going to be some explaining to do, especially if services are launched. Sometimes there's been stories of people that have been charged because the helicopters have come out and find out there is no distress, somebody's just messing around. So just be aware of that. Anyway, that's it. If you are doing deep blue water passages, please have a life raft, and please know how to use it. And that's it. I hope you guys, I know it's not sailing, but it's going to be a little while before Paquita's in the water. Before I started making system videos, I wanted to do this. Thank you so much